USC knocks off Colorado State, final of 38-24.
Colorado.
They are the Pac-12 South Division champions, the Trojans, now in great shape, heading toward the Pac-12 championship game. So despite the ups and downs and the disappointments and the roller coaster Pac-12 supremacy, still in the grasp of USC as we bring in Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles. Nick, it was 27-0 at one point, and the Trojans kind of cruised from there. But give us your assessment of the boys' play today.
Well, they're still playing sloppy. They're still not putting together a perfect game, but their mistakes are not as extreme or debilitating, which is good. For starters, they're cutting down on the turnovers, always good. But they still have problems with discipline on penalties, especially. They're one of the most penalized teams in the entire country. They're having problems on special teams. They missed a field goal, extra point, had a kick or a punt block today. I believe on one kick return, the returner dropped the football, but then recovered it. So not a great day for special teams. But overall, statistically, they were pretty good. They were sort of right in line with their average stats they get when they win. They had just a few more runs than passes. Darnold was pretty efficient, just above 60% completions. Only 193 yards, and I say only because normally they get a lot more when they run the ball 38 times. But yeah, they could have been a lot sharper. It was not the cleanest second half, was not the most inspiring first quarter. But second and third quarter really showed you what this team is capable of when they're actually, playing well and dialed in and doing what they're capable of. Colorado, give them credit. They fought, but I think there was just too much talent on USC for the Buffaloes to be able to do much. But USC is now the Pac-12 South champs. They've got a little bit of business to take care of with the Bruins next week, and then they finally get a week off. But it's nice that they're playing their best football now at the end of the season. It would have been nicer if they would have been playing it all season long. But the little things, they still got to get cleaned up. The penalties, I think, are the next major thing they've got to take care of because, they'll probably be able to get by UCLA even with the penalties and some of the other things. They're in the poor special teams. But if you're talking about Washington, maybe a rematch with Washington State, big time game, it's going to be a lot more difficult for USC to overcome those mistakes that have crippled them against some of the better competition they faced.
Ajeen Harris, 2 interceptions. Was a 14-0 game. USC late second quarter when he picked one off and took it to the house with Colorado driving, and that pretty much put at least an early first nail in the coffin. USC up big. Colorado did make a bit of a comeback, and there was a fourth down play in which the Buffs were down by 2 touchdowns late. Quarterback Steve Montez thought he had the first down to convert it and possibly in the red zone could have scored, gone for the onside kick, and still had a breath of life left for the 5-6 Buffs as they need to win that final game against Utah to get to bowl play. And Nick, you mentioned UCLA coming up, and USC with that interesting, as we discussed in the offseason, having to play these 12 consecutive games with the bye week, maybe not being a bye week because it's at the end of the season, but now claiming what we expected, the Pac-12 championship game. It will be a bye week going into one of the more difficult games of the season with a muddled Pac-12 North. And now that Stanford has taken out Washington, it could be Stanford, Washington, Washington State. And I'm going to greatly conjecture and stretch here, but with Georgia going down today, that pretty much determines that the SEC is not going to go for this dream 2 teams into the playoff situation, that the winner of the SEC championship game is it for the SEC. The ACC should get in. The Big 12 should get in. But if Ohio State runs the table, wins the Big 10 championship with 2 losses, now that Notre Dame looks to be ousted down 27-0 at the half, maybe there's a battle for that 4th playoff spot between the Pac-12 champion and the Big 10 champion, and it gives USC just a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, there is a path. And it's the way it's looking like, everyone's been so quick to proclaim, this 2-loss team is now that conference is out. This team picked up a second loss. That conference is out. It's like they've never been around a season of college football before.
Exactly.
Like I wouldn't proclaim anyone dead unless the entire program has physically quit football forever. But I think USC in particular, their biggest problem was the fact that they just got stomped by Notre Dame, who is, I believe, as we speak, currently getting curb stomped by Miami. So it's not a good look. Also, if Notre Dame has 2 losses and USC has 2 losses and Notre Dame thumped USC, can you really put them above Notre Dame? I don't know. Well, they can, but I think Washington hasn't played that tough of a schedule to get in as a 2-loss. But it's certainly not if you stack them up against, say, an Ohio State. Because you just I don't think there's anybody on Washington's schedule that compares to Oklahoma, even though OSU lost that game. But it's just, I think OSU's had a tougher road than Washington. I think USC is going to have a hard time getting over the hump of getting just blown out by Notre Dame. So it's possible, and that's assuming Ohio State or the Big Ten even has a 2-loss champion. It's who knows at this point the way things are going. I mean, Ohio State destroyed somebody this week and then got destroyed last week. Wisconsin's on a roll, but who knows if they'll collapse. It's looking like Oklahoma's good and they're gonna be fine, but they also lost to Iowa State, which nobody saw coming. So I think it's just sort of, you got to let it play out. And there is a path. I don't think it's a particularly strong one at this point, but it's possible.
Yeah, I'm just throwing out possibilities that have a 1 or 2% chance of happening. Yes, losing 2 games and losing in what's considered, I'm not going to say it for sure, but considered to be most likely the weakest conference this season. And then, getting trucked by Notre Dame. It's one thing, and it's in the committee's discretion that if you lose that game at Notre Dame 31-28, that's a much different loss. It's a loss. So it's measured the same in the standings, but it's a different perception than it is getting trucked 49-14. And that's what happened to USC. The Texas win is marginal, and the in-conference play is somewhat marginal in a weak South Division this season. And the Stanford win's okay, and not having played Washington in the regular season slightly hurts as well.
I also, I think the committee has shown, at least last year, they were willing to say, you're a team with a better record, even though you didn't win your conference, we'll move you in. So, I don't know that necessarily precludes certain, particularly SEC teams, that might not win their conference, but only have 1 loss. Like I think if Georgia, say, beats Alabama, and that's Alabama's only loss, I think Alabama can still make a pretty good argument for being in. So I think it's going to get muddy. Oddly enough, it was supposed to get easier with Notre Dame losing. And
it is a lot clearer with Notre Dame out of the way.
But it's also just opened the door to a lot more other possibilities that could shake out in the next couple weeks.
USC knocks off Colorado 38-24. They are officially the Pac-12 South champions. They will play the Pac-12 North winner with a 3-way tie currently between Stanford, Washington, and Washington State, all at 5-2. So that should be a whole lot of fun in the next few weeks with the Apple Cup coming up in a few weeks, and USC with a much-needed bye week before the Pac-12 championship game, trying to rest up with a number of injuries on hand to key positional players. Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles helping us break down USC football. Join him on Conquest Chronicles for the very best in USC football coverage. Nick, we appreciate the discussion.
Of course, Mark, anytime. You might